Hey guys, what's up? Today I'm going to be sharing with you um, my thoughts on developing the shadow functions. But first, I'm going to kind of break down what the shadow functions are for anyone who doesn't know, or at least how to figure them out. Um, so, before I start that, what I want to share with you guys is that I have another video coming out um, pretty much at the same time as this, where you're going to see kind of what I went through to get my thoughts aligned on the shadow functions, because really shadow functions are deep and I'm not trying to go too deep with and like lose people in one conversation, and I just want to really be kind of clear on how things work with the shadow functions. And so what I did was I made a video with my, or I made, actually, it wasn't even intentional. It was accidentally. I recorded it intentionally, but it ended up being a good conversation with an INTJ who I'm really good friends with, and who kind of understands the MBTI, but I texted him and I was like, hey, do you want to learn about the shadow functions just so I can kind of get my thoughts out there so I have them prepared, because I don't want to be giving people the wrong ideas on how to use shadow functions or just be completely wrong when I present them, because it is a way deeper subject than just acknowledging the dominant cognitive function and the auxiliary, and even deeper than going into the tertiary and the inferior, which actually I'm gonna, in these videos, sometimes refer to them as the archetypes, as Carl Jung interpreted them. So your dominant would be hero, uh, auxiliary, parent, then you have child and anima. And then when we get into the shadow functions in a few minutes, I'll give you the archetypes for those. Um, those, I haven't always been able to find all the archetypes, but I'll get into that in a few minutes. So anyway, me and an INTJ had a conversation. So the conversation's a little broken up, and you're going to have to follow along. It's like a 50-minute conversation. And it wasn't really videotaped. It was just recorded. So you'll see that video next, coming out with this one. And if you don't know anything about shadow functions, I would at least watch this one first, because the next one you're really gonna have to like think about and like kind of intuit what's going on. Like it's a good conversation, and it's pretty easy to follow along with if you understand the basic functions at least, and the generals of the shadow functions. All right, so let's get started with this. The first thing you want to know is how to figure out your shadow functions. And what you're going to do is take the first and the last letter of your type and change their attitudes. Or so if you're extroverted, you're going to change introverted. If you're introverted, you're going to change to extrovert. If you're a judger, you're going to change to perceiver to judger. And when you do that, what that means is that your arrangement actually changes the cognitive function to the cognitive function stack, the four cognitive functions, to the same function with a different attitude. So if you were introverted thinking, you are now extroverted thinking. If you were extroverted intuiting, you're now introverted intuiting, and that's the INTP. For an INTJ, it would be, their shadow would be extroverted intuiting and introverted thinking. It changes it's really just the attitude of the function changes for each one. And there's other parts that go into that, which is like your aspiration, which you would actually take away from your second function pair. So your tertiary and your inferior function, you would take where that comes from would also lead to another type, which is kind of like an aspiration type, And the reason that that's an aspiration type is because it's the opposite of your dominant function. So like for an INTP, introverted thinking, you're going to have extroverted feeling. And the same goes with whatever's in the middle there. And then after extroverted feeling, that's where you find your shadow. And what I'm trying to say is that the shadow isn't your full unconscious. There's more parts of your unconscious. It's just the shadow is probably the easiest to get to. It's the easiest to use those functions just because they're in the same order as what you're using, and also because you have to understand that the second function is kind of the reason everyone says to develop it so much is because it's a transcendental function, so it's supposed to unlock a lot of other things. But the important thing is to unlock those other functions. That's what I've realized through this development. And what one big point that you're going to notice in the next conversation as well is initiation. Initiation is where you are going to have to tap into your deeper function, your shadow functions, your other functions. However you want to see them, they're just functions that you prefer not to use all the time. And so yeah, when you have initiation periods, you're going to have to tap into those functions. Which makes sense because it's almost like giving up to give it, like, because it's when you're doing something new, you have to give up what you know. Like you have to like let your unconscious take over to the things that you don't know, learn those things. And a lot of times that's like getting taught something, and so unconsciously you have to tap into those. And that's why it's going to be certain, and for each type they're going to have their own initiation periods, but some general ones that, so like you're always going to have your hero, which is your dominant function, and your anima or animus, male, whether you're male or female, which are going to be opposites in the function themselves and in their attitude to the world. So for example, you have introverted thinking, and then you have extroverted feeling for the INTP. So what you're trying to do when you're when you first start developing is you're trying to connect that. And it makes a lot of sense because right next to the anima is the child. So your child at first has to connect to the mother and father and just people in general. And because it's really the archetype, and it's just how your archetype is going to get there. And so your SI and FE for an INTP has to connect, or that's your first stage, and that you're making that connection. And then the next time that really would connect would be when you get married. Your masculine side is going to meet with a feminine side and be able to kind of unite and become whole. But in between there, like, there's always that chaos period where it is stress, and you have to get, like, that's what it is. Your shadow is like your stress function, and you don't prefer to be there, but it happens. And it's important that you know what you're capable of in those functions, because when you know, you're able to prevent them, for one, and when you do have to express those functions, you're going to be confident in being able to have self-control, because they may show, like, they're more immature. That's generally, as you go down, things get more immature, which you can mature them just like you can mature your extroverted intuiting if you're an INTP, or your extroverted thinking if you're an INTJ, or ISTJ, however it is. Like, you can always mature every function. It's choosing to do it, and it's easier to do with those first four, and it's like doing something that you're scared to do. Like, that's what it. And if you don't want to get better, then you don't have to. Or if you've been it. there is one time like you really don't have to, I guess. And it's like if your shadow is really going to be like, if you've decided you're not going to invest the time to develop it and like take the repercussions that come from it, then and learn from them and advance them and use them when they're necessary, because that's what's going to make you happy, is like being able to use those functions. And when you really think about it, the fact that FI is your on as far as your shadow goes, it's probably the deepest part that you understand, because you do understand your shadow. You'll see in the next conversation as well that like the INTJ, after being explained it, he's like I think, and I did this too. Like you start realizing that you see that part of you. You really do. It's a part of you. It's in your head. It comes up. Like we end up realizing like it doesn't come up as your functions. It comes up as like archetypes of things that you want to do and a picture of these things that you want to do. And what I said is like, I know I do these things when they come to me. Like it's just like once I see these pictures, like where I could throw them away. And I've heard other people say similar things. Like once something comes to them, it's like they do it, even if it's scary and even if it doesn't make sense fully. But it's like something that like makes enough sense where like you can know what you're supposed to be doing. That's like an archetype in your head coming from your unconscious shadow. It could even be coming from the other parts. But we're going into shadow, and I think that that's the easiest to get to at first. So, all right. So the next thing that you're going to want to know is the archetypes that are going to appear in the shadow, and the reason that you're going to want to know these ones is because their names are actually going to give you a kind of an insight of where they're going to show up and why they're in your shadow and why you kind of oppose them, which opposing is the original archetype. Just so you know, not opposing and is pretty much in critical parent. I'm not sure that Jung used those names for that, but I haven't found out what names he's used, and I found those a few times and they do make sense. He could have, I might have missed it, but yeah. So opposing will be your it's going to be technically your fifth function. Then your sixth function, which is a very important function, is going to be known as your critical parent. And this is important because it's going to be kind of act like that, a critical parent, but inside your own head, your own critical parent to yourself. Then your seventh function is going to be known as your trickster, and Jung says that this specific archetype shows up a lot, and the trickster is probably one of the most notorious like archetypes of all time. Like you'll hear it in the next conversation as we like it's shown in every like movie like that you can think of, and it's just the archetype that shows up. And as a kid, this shows up a lot in your life as well, and it causes you a lot of trouble. And what you're going to notice is that the trickster function lines up with the child function that is in your more conscious functions, and the and that's going to make sense because the trickster is going to be tricking your child. So that's why a lot of people say that your third function and your sixth function probably can at an early time like interchange. Like you can go for as an INTP, my third function is introverted sensing. So if this theory is correct, then what it's saying is that extroverted sensing is easy to tap into, but at a young age it's probably going to play a lot of tricks and it may take a lot of work on. So I'm saying the sixth function, but it's really the seventh function. My mistake. I think I said the sixth function once, but the sixth function is critical parent, the seventh function is the trickster, and then your fourth function is going to be your demon, which is going to completely oppose your most dominant function. So for an INTP, you're saying introverted thinking and introverted feeling, which I would really like to know if you agree, if you're an INTP, that getting in touch with your own feelings is a lot harder than understanding like even other people's emotions. Like you kind of I understand other people's emotions, but understanding how I feel in situations, I don't always do things because I want to. I mean, if I think of it and it's like I act on ideas more so than on my own feelings. I would say I have to get like inspired to act on my own feelings kind of by someone usually. So FE would kind of, I always say that like FE for me is going to kick in whatever if like I'm affected by FE at a time by something going on around me or whatever, that's going to kick me into my shadow if it's important that I need to like get something done or something like that. So those are kind of where you're going to see things pop up. The critical parent, like I said, I think that the reason that that one makes sense is because when you think about if you develop NE as an INTP and you develop your auxiliary function well, eventually it would give you more capability of developing an I, which is very useful, and it just takes a lot of experience to develop NI. And I'm not saying I'm like I always call myself a professional INTP, but I know I have a lot of developing to do, and I mean really it's a journey. The fun thing is like thinking about like the possibility. For me, it's the possibilities. Like I'm 28, I still have a lifetime, and I'm learning about this, and I'm just seeing like, yeah, like growth is really possible. But I don't want to talk too much about that because I think I got you on that. So really quick, the next two things, it's more of like the cautions. It's one of the reasons, it's another reason to learn it is that loops can send you into your shadow functions if they overstress you. Think about exploration with harmony, if that's how you want to use them. So you're if you get in that kind of loop as an INTP, that could cause some stress, and that's like overindulging. Like you should still be okay with getting into those loops and understand when they're going. Big thing is understanding when you're getting into those loops so you don't like overindulge in them. Like you can limit, you can minimize it, and even like intentionally control it. Like that's that for your own sake. Like that's what you should be doing. And the last thing that I want to talk about in this, and more like, because at the end of the conversation that if you go listen to the next one, it was kind of like a little eye opener to me that like projection could get kind of bad. And what projection is that when you meet other people who have your shadow functions within them, it can irritate you or cause you to. You're going to recognize it within them. And if you have control of it, there's a good chance that it wouldn't affect you as much because you would understand the development process of it. So it's important to understand. That's the minimum I can say. Like, and decide how you're going to use it. What I'm going to do is this was kind of like pretty, I gave you a lot of information, I think. But I really have some personal stuff I want to talk about, like that I can explain how I see these working out in my life, but I'm going to do that in a different video. So let me know what you think about this one, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel, subscribe. Let me know anything you want to know about in the comments. Let me know, even if you don't agree with me, I'm willing to hear if you don't agree with me, because I mean, I don't think many people agree on this subject because it's very in depth. So check out the next video, and I hope to see you soon. Have a good one.